Covered in her own blood and in excruciating pain, a 35-year-old zoo staff lay on the ground. The bear that she took care of for years had her on the menu for his lunch. But how could this happen? Zoos are always very well secured, aren't they? None of that matters if someone makes a small mistake. It had such a big impact that it even killed someone. For 106 years, the Jacksonville Zoo and Gardens has been the only walking safari in Northeast Florida. Many families come from far and wide to discover wildlife through the most interactive and educational methods. For so long, the zoo has been a choice destination for family adventure. But there's more. One of the greatest reasons this zoo has stood the test of time is the fact that they have amazing staff. Known for hiring the best hands, the zoo consists of the best experienced and dedicated professionals who work closely enough with the animals to be able to cater to them and educate visitors about them. With the finest vets, care specialists, animal educationalists, visitors from all around have a nice time learning about the animals and seeing them in real time as they strut, crawl, and climb around their conservations. They didn't stop there. On top of all of these, the establishment also has one of the most beautiful gardens where visitors can just kick back, relax, and have a great time. For over a century, not a bad rep. No scandal, not a single thing has ever gone wrong. December 21st, 2022, 5 p.m. The moment it went terribly wrong. The day started out like any other day. Visitors trooping into the establishment with their families and children, pointing at the animals with glee, taking memorable pictures, and listening to what the staff had to say about each of the animals in the enclosure. The staff catered to their guests, high-fived some of the kids, and did their jobs amazingly. Little did they know that later that evening, something gruesome was going to happen. As closing time approached, little by little, the visitors began to disperse. They had an amazing day, and it was time to head home. The staff bade them farewell, and the moment the last visitor left, they returned to their duties, the part that visitors don't see: feeding the animals. One by one, they approached each enclosure and expertly fed the animals by opening a door compartment that would allow them to place the food down, then close it so the animals could feed. Sounds simple enough, but after 106 years of stellar excellence, one of the zoo staff was about to make the worst mistake ever. She fed each of the animals and finally approached the bears. If she had known, she'd have been more careful, because we are getting to the scary part. Johnny and Claire were two black bears that stared back at her through the steel enclosure. They knew what was coming, and at this same time every day, the staff came to them with food. They were happy about that, but make no mistake, they were still in an enclosure. And if given the chance, they'd get out and run to freedom, destroying everything in their path. Unknown to everyone involved, one of these bears was about to get a slice of freedom. As routinely as she had probably done 100 times before, the female zoo staff opened the safe door of the bear enclosure, put the food down, and waved sweetly to Johnny and Claire. But again, remember, they may have had human names, but they were no humans. And little did the zoo staff know that Johnny was about to show her just how brutal he was. At first, it seemed routine, like nothing was out of place. But as the zoo staff turned around to put Claire's meal in order, Johnny, the 5-year-old American black bear, noticed something. Because of that one error, there was nothing stopping the bears from making a run for it. Claire, on the one hand, was a little bit benign and showed no desire to leave or do any other vicious thing, but Johnny had other plans. The mistake was too costly, way too costly regardless of the excuse. The zookeeper hummed to herself, then she paused. She could have sworn she heard a sound. There was nothing. She carried on with her work, but then she could feel a presence around her. First, she glanced back at the enclosure. When she noticed what she did, she had never been more shocked in her entire life. What happened next is the stuff nightmares are made of. The next thing she saw was Johnny's figure launched into the air, heading for her. Before she could scream, the bear landed on her and knocked her down. Now was the moment of truth, of life and death. Nothing else mattered, only survival. The zookeeper had no idea what to do. She knew about every animal in this zoo, and if there was something she knew about bears, it's that they showed no mercy when they attacked. But now, the story gets more intense. She could not run. She could not hide. She could not fight back. Her only option was to try and stay alive and make it in one piece. So, expertly, she turned around and lay on her stomach, covering the back of her head with her hands in a frantic effort to protect her vital organs. She knew that all it took was one of Johnny's sharp claws to puncture a fragile organ, and she was gone. In the meantime, Johnny went on a rampage, tearing into her. He pressed his entire weight on her, making it difficult for the zoo staff to breathe properly. Then, with his teeth and claws, he dug into her thighs and back. The pain shot through her body like 1,000 bolts of electricity, and so the zoo staff screamed for help as loudly as she could. There were still some of the other staff scattered around the establishments. Perhaps they would hear her. But her screams seemed to piss Johnny off some more, so he continued his vicious attack. Standing on top of her like she was a dominated prey, he raised his claw and sent it back down, scratching on her back like he was digging for dirt. Then he lowered his head against the back of her neck in an attempt to bite into the supple flesh there, but her hands covered it, so the damage meant for her neck was dealt to her hand. Finally, another staff member in a nearby enclosure heard her screams and rushed to the scene. The sight that greeted her was so raw and vicious that she let out screams too. Soon after, several other employees heard it too, and a red alert alarm was sounded. Quickly, 2 of them drove a truck to the enclosure and began beeping the horn at the bear. The employees were yelling, throwing items, and sprayed a fire extinguisher at the bear. Undeterred by their efforts, the bear bit the keeper again, dragging her away. Johnny was tossing the zookeeper across the floor like an injured antelope, trying to turn her around so he could end this attack once and for all. The other staff were confused. One thing was for sure, they couldn't go in and break up the attack. Johnny would turn on them too. So they did everything possible in their power to distract Johnny from killing their colleague. And now more staff ran to join in and stop the attack. Again, they shouted on top of their voices. They honked the horns of their cars. They even threw random items at him so he would be at least hurt or distracted. But in all of this, Johnny still didn't flinch. He continued biting, scratching, and tearing the zookeeper's back and thighs. The bear had to be tranquilized, and the vet was on his way with the tranquilizers. But the other staff knew that by the time the vet got here, it may be too late for their injured zookeeper and colleague. So the staff radioed a curator with a lethal weapon team who also came and witnessed what was happening. He made the executive decision to do what needed to be done. According to the report, at this point, he grabbed a Remington 870 shotgun and aimed it at the bear, careful to avoid the zookeeper. He took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. Within 1 short millisecond, the bullet flew straight towards Johnny and hit his sides. Johnny halted his attack and staggered away from the zookeeper. The employee then shot the bear 3 more times, killing him. The bear let out one last growl and fell to the floor. That was it. The chaos was over. Right there on the floor, still by the enclosure, the first responders were called and they came in to check on her. Thankfully, she was still alive. However, the damage had already been done. At the end of the day, the zookeeper survived, but the trauma of her ordeal would always stay with her. If you liked this video, then this one would blow your mind.